A little more light, Chris.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Union League Club of Chicago Public Affairs Committee ongoing discussion of election 2020. Our guest today is Mark Curran, former sheriff of Lake County, the Republican candidate for the United States Senate. Mark, it's great to have you with us. Thank you for joining us at the Union League Club.
Thank you, Chris.
So today's format really has two halves. We want to hear from Mark, and we've invited Senator Durbin, and his staff says that they're working on finding a time. We'll keep you all posted. In addition to that, Mark's going to speak for about the next 20 minutes and give us his normal introduction to his campaign. And then after that, the back end of this meeting today is going to be fielded with your questions. So don't be bashful. Send the questions to me through the chat feature on your Zoom page, and I will shepherd those questions to Mark Curran. We have a tradition at the Union League Club going back to our founding in 1879 that we recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Of course, on Zoom, it's not easy for all of us to stand up, etc. I'm just going to hold my heart and say, we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And with that, I want to introduce Mark Curran, attorney, former sheriff, lifelong adherent to, let's say, law enforcement, who is now making his first run statewide here in Illinois for United States Senate. Mark, it's great to have you with us. The floor is yours. Introduce us to you and your campaign over the next, say, 20 minutes or so.
You got it. So Chris knows me well, but the rest of y'all don't. So by way of background, I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, had South Side parents, lived there briefly, moved up to Lake County, spent most of my life in Lake County. My dad was a law school classmate of Dan Walker, and he was a godfather to his oldest daughter, and went to work at Montgomery Wards as a lawyer under Walker, and that's how we wound up in Lake County. I live in Libertyville. That's where I am right now. I'm married. My wife, Irene, is a lawyer. She's been with, she's 24 years out of law, 25, no, more than that, I'm sorry. I'm 31 years out. She's 30 years out of law school. And we've been married 25 years. We got three boys, 22, 21, and 16. And the 16-year-old, he's at Carmel Catholic right now. The 22-year-old is at John Marshall downtown, and the 21-year-old is a senior at Marquette. I started, I went to law school. Let me back up a little bit. I went to Loyola Academy for high school. And then for college, I went to Spring Hill, a little Jesuit school down in Mobile, Alabama. I was a business major. And graduating college, I worked briefly at Continental Bank. And then I went to law school almost right the next year. Went to Chicago Kent College of Law and worked in the state's attorney's office during law school. I knew I wanted to try cases, and I felt like that was the best background for it. Worked in Cook County. I had an offer from both the Cook County and the Lake County State's Attorney's Office. I chose Lake County. I thought it would be a quicker path to trying the big cases, and was in the Lake County State's Attorney's Office from 1990 to 1998. I knew a lot of people from DuPage, and Jim Ryan, who was the Attorney General at the time in 1998. They asked me to come work there to start up a new sexually violent person bureau. I did that. Then I became the chief of gang crimes and trials and training as well for the Attorney General's office. I went to the civil division at the end. I asked Jim Ryan, I had become close to Jim Ryan, if I could get some training in civil practice of law. And so I went into civil and represented, Illinois Department of Corrections, Illinois State Police, Department of Human Services, all of the agencies that perform under the governor. I also defended us in civil rights suits and on and on. In 2002, I felt like I needed to make some money, went out into private practice. I had a conflict public defender position as well. So I was having prosecuted a lot of people for murder all across the state of Illinois. I wound up representing people. I represented almost a dozen murders in private practice, but I had civil practice as well. And I taught constitutional law, taught criminal law, taught a lot of different classes at Columbia College for years and years. Not Columbia College downtown, but Columbia College in Missouri up in Lake County. And I also taught for police training boards and a whole host of places where I taught. And then in 2006, I thought about running for state representative. A couple of friends of mine encouraged me to run for sheriff instead. I ran as a Democrat in 2006. I was basically my dad was a labor, came from, obviously he was management side at the end, he went to Sidley and Austin, but he had come from a strong labor background. And, that's kind of the way we were raised, with the middle class mindset. And so we were Democrats for the most part, but socially conservative. I started to see I ran as a Democrat, as I said, in 2006. I was elected as a Democrat. In 2008, I switched parties and became a Republican. I think it was a much better fit for me. I've never looked back. By having switched parties, I was the number one target of the Democrats up north forever. But I consistently was the highest Republican vote getter in 2010, 2014, and 2018. In Lake County, the third largest county in Illinois, I was the highest vote getter every one of those cycles. So I was a very popular Republican, beating other Republicans by 30,000 votes or more. Went back into private practice after having lost my last election by 137 votes out of 250,000. Every other Republican in Lake County got clobbered in that cycle. And, and Republicans sat home. So I went back into private practice, and then here I am running for U.S. Senate. I had a 5-way primary, and I got hit from all sides. All of the newspapers endorsed me. The Chicago Tribune endorsed me. If you want to look at the endorsements, they were really strong. Even the more liberal Chicago Sun-Times said, he's our choice, but he's not just our choice. He's an excellent choice. Daily Herald, all the papers throughout the state endorsed me. As sheriff, I was under budget 12 years in a row. I took an office that was basically a good old boys office, where it's people had to know the sheriff and what have you, and there were no standards, there was nothing. And I transformed the office. And if you want to see a little bit about that, look at the Tribune endorsement for me in the general election cycle over Dick Durbin. And it talks about some of the things that I did in taking an office that had a lot of problems in transforming that office. Basically achieved accreditation throughout the office on both the state and the national level. I would submit to you, I made it in a national office. And one of the things that being sheriff prepared me for further politics was, I'll tell you, in business, you fire people that they go get on with their lives and they go do something else. In law enforcement, you tell a guy that he has a pension and that can never make that kind of money doing something else, that he needs to turn his gun and his badge in. You've made an enemy for life. And I never blinked. I took when the fork was in the road, I took the side that led to doing the right thing again and again and again. I'm somebody that spent a week in his own jail calling, the first time that ever happened, it was an international story, calling attention to criminal justice reform. I've been a leader on immigration reform. I mean, even when President Obama was in the White House, I was flown to Washington, D.C. by Vice President Biden at his expense to work on the 2013 immigration bill. Grover Norquist flew me out to his Wednesday audience out on the Hill to help push the immigration. I'd sit on airplanes with Steve Case. So it was something that the immigration leaders thought that I spoke very articulately on, and he had a lot of credibility on trying to get an immigration bill passed. Additionally, we did a lot just to make that office an office that had credibility, and it was a tough office. I had over almost 700 employees. As far as this race is going, I look at the backdrop in terms of I'm somebody that was a constitutional law professor, although at the college level, but somebody that is intimately familiar with our founding documents. I very much believe in those documents. I believe that it's slipping away. And the problem is that the worldview of the left right now, there is no objective truth. So we have no idea where they're heading. They're heading further and further left, but where does that end? And so I'm somebody that has tried to rein it back in and talk about the fact that it's the government we fear. And let me tell you something, if you want to look me up and talk about a guy that's written about the code of silence in law enforcement, I have time and time again, and my articles have been published, and that doesn't make me popular. But I'm somebody that's consistent. I don't trust the government. The government, they'll come after you because they're made up of human beings. And you look at the guy I'm running against, Senator Durbin, who's used the IRS to go after political enemies, who's used the Justice Department to go after political enemies. I mean, so that's there's no reason to have great confidence in the government. We need to be cautious of the role of government in our lives. So I've talked about the fact that Senator Durbin has been in Congress 38 years. And yesterday, Lynn Sweet from the Sun-Times was interviewing me. And so, what about Mitch McConnell? I said, same thing. He should have retired 20 years ago. This is not right. So these guys become comfortable with the lobbyists become comfortable with them, the special interests, and everybody else gets killed. America gets killed. So I'm somebody that does not aspire to be in Washington, D.C. forever. I'm somebody that wants to serve the citizens. I want to fight on behalf of the middle class. The reality is, as I mentioned earlier, I have 3 boys, but 1% of America has more wealth than the bottom 90%. And that's why socialism is growing in support, despite the fact that I believe socialism is a tremendous evil. It's intrinsically evil because it usurps freedom. But we got to address these issues of getting good paying jobs back in America. Senator Durbin, who was a big supporter of NAFTA, was a big supporter of tariff breaks for the Chinese and everything else. He doesn't really have a core. He'll do whatever it takes, whatever he thinks the left wants him to do. And that's something that I've spoken of. So Willie Wilson's in the race. He's a third party candidate that's running. And he's spent millions and he's been hitting Senator Durbin hard. And I think he's helping my candidacy as well. And what he's addressing is the fact that Senator Durbin's been horrible for blacks. Willie Wilson's running on the concept of reparations. But if y'all have not been to East St. Louis, Illinois, it might be worth a field trip because you will not believe it's America. It is a third world city. It is unbelievable. And you have whole city blocks that went up in flames years and years ago, and they're left to stand. The structures are for decades. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible to drive around East St. Louis, Illinois. And that's Senator Durbin's hometown, where he grew up, where he went to a Catholic high school, where the teachers that molded him, where his parents were, where his parents' friends were. He's done nothing for it. He's had all this power, and he's done nothing for it. He has not done. One of the reasons the Tribune endorsed me as well is he supported Mike Madigan continuing as chairman of the party. He's endorsed Kim Foxx. He endorses every Democrat. He has no independent voice whatsoever, and he has not been good for Illinois. So, Chris, I look forward to answering questions, buddy.
That's terrific, Mark. I'll start off with a few of my own. You've spoken about some areas of contrast between you and Dick Durbin, but our co-sponsor today is the Standard Club of Chicago, the beloved Standard Club, our neighbor, just a couple of blocks away from the Union League Club. So I want to ask you about international relations and about where you are on international relations, which come before all senators, not just the ones on the Committee of Foreign Relations or on the Armed Services Committee, but they come before all senators because of the appointments, the review of appointments of the higher officials at the State Department, the higher officials at our intelligence agencies, and indeed all of our ambassadors. So you've had a lot of local background and local experience and law enforcement experience. Could you give us some sense of your views internationally and how they might diverge from those of Senator Durbin?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I've been to Israel as a guest of AIPAC, as sheriff of a large county with a sizable Jewish population, and as far as the Middle East, I mean, I'm somebody that does not believe that we should have fought the bulk of these wars over the last 50 years. So I'm not a very much of a I believe in the concept of just war, where there's a litmus and what's the end game and is that achievable. So I wouldn't have had us in all these battles. But by the same token, I very much believe that radical Islam exists. I was a graduate of the FBI Academy, and the reality is there's a lot of people that believe in the Quran that there's a sixth pillar. It's specifically spelled out, and that's jihad. And that is in regards to infidels, and infidels are anyone that doesn't believe what they believe, that won't submit to their concept of Allah. So ultimately, my father-in-law grew up in for a lot of his life in Baghdad. He was an Orthodox Christian in Baghdad. He went to Jesuit University of Baghdad. Now, there's no Christians in any of those countries anymore, very, very small Christians. And they've been terrorized. They've had their houses burned down, their churches burned down, and they've left. And Israel hasn't. Israel has stood strong. And Israel is, those are heroic people, and we need to continue to defend Israel. And I very much believe in Israel. And I don't think Senator Durbin in his worldview sees good and bad. So radical Islam is evil. It's real. And too many people submit to that interpretation of Islam. So right there, we're different. Similarly with China. China is a horrible actor. I mean, let's be honest about it. China has killed, how many forced abortions, millions. They've had probably 1 million executions of their own people. I mean, it's just a rogue nation in terms of the people that run China. And they've been killing us for years and years and years on trade. And I think President Trump is the first president really to ever speak to this truthfully. And I think he gets it. It's a balance. Illinois is an ag state. Previously, we were exporting all this ag to China, and now we're not. So I understand China. I understand their end game is to destroy America. I absolutely believe that. So, all of that has to be coming into the balance. As far as other countries throughout the world, my wife's mom is a Greek immigrant. My wife was born here shortly after her parents came here, and I'm from Irish descent. But I have groups all over Chicagoland that are immigrants, and they're all supporting me. The Serbs, the Russians, the Polish, and I think that they recognize the fact that our country is slipping away. These people have come from nations where there was socialism, and they came to America in the hope that this was a better place. And now they see the parallels to what happened to their nation and what's happening to America, and they are frightened. So, people think that it's the America First concept is somehow, not a braggadocious and not unifying and this, that, and the other. I'm telling you, if it's over for America, it's over for the globe. And really, not somebody that understands the Book of Revelation. So I'm not gonna sit there and act like But I mean, people are talking about the end of times, and it's crazy times we're living in. And I see it.
Okay, back to the local. I've got a question here, an emailed question, but everybody, you can submit questions through the chat function on the chat box on your Zoom page, and I would love to get them, and then I'll sort of get them to Sheriff Curran here during our remaining time. Here's one that was sent by email through Brian Daly. Both the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago are very seriously financially challenged. Do you support or oppose federal aid to cities and states that realistically are unable to fund their current obligations?
Yeah, thanks, Brian, for the question. So, I mean, Chicago, if I'm blessed to go to Washington, D.C., I represent Illinois. So, I'm not going to sit there and say, I'm not going to fight for aid for Illinois. But the reality is that's not in its best interest to just, try to give it money that's going nowhere, and they're not going to balance their books, and they're not going to address, the spending problem. So I think that one of the things is that I've been an honest broker, Brian. So I'm not going to sit there and just ask for a check. I'm going to demand reforms as well. That if Illinois does get a bailout, and I don't even see that happening. I think these pensions I don't know what they're going to do. I think that bankruptcy is knocking on the door, and they're probably going to have to, get real about how can we achieve bankruptcy by, amending the Illinois Constitution or taking cases to court to challenge that process. So, but I would work for Illinois, but by the same token, I get it that, drunken sailors have been running Illinois.
Since you raised that point, let me ask you, what's your position on the so-called fair tax, the attempt to amend the Constitution that will appear on the ballot for folks who have not yet voted, or that folks saw on the ballot when they did already vote?
Right. So, Chris, I'm 100% against the fair tax. I think it's a horrible idea. I think it's just going to expedite the exodus out of Illinois. I do not trust these Illinois politicians with my money, and I don't think anybody else should either.
So that's another area of distinction between yourself and Senator Durbin.
Right.
As long as we're on that, Amy Coney Barrett. Amy Coney Barrett just spent 3 days answering questions or making statements down in the Senate hearing room for the Judiciary Committee, on which Senator Durbin sits. He does not appear to be moving into support of Amy Coney Barrett. I don't know that he's announced that yet. We certainly have begun to hear from other Democrats, predictably, that they are going to oppose her elevation to the Supreme Court. What's your position on Amy Coney Barrett and on the philosophy she advocates of originalism and textualism?
Right. So what I would say is that I would vote for Amy Coney Barrett. I think she's going to be a terrific justice. I mean, I think that she will bring some of her compassion to the bench, and that, having adopted kids and having a child with Down syndrome, that I don't think anybody needs to worry about, healthcare being only for the rich. That's not going to be her judicial philosophy. As far as originalism, yes, I mean, for me, it's the founding. It's even before the Constitution. It's the Declaration of Independence, and it's clearly stated in the Declaration of Independence that our rights are based in nature's law and nature's God. And so, in the past, when the Constitution didn't line up with the Declaration of Independence in not recognizing blacks as fully human and not allowing women the right to vote, then it was wrong. The Constitution was wrong. So get back to the Declaration of Independence. That's the worldview, the natural law, and that's John Locke, and that was Thomas Aquinas, and that's my philosophy. That I see the world through a natural law lens, and essentially that's the way I see everything.
So now moving to back on this issue of aid to states, that gets us to the question of the current so-called stimulus package. President Trump has said he wants a big, bold, beautiful package. Speaker Pelosi apparently wants a big package, but they disagree about what should be in it. And Mitch McConnell, who you mentioned in your comments, has been talking about a package that is perhaps 1/3 the size. McConnell at $500 billion, but Trump and Pelosi seem to be talking about packages well over $1 trillion. So One question is, what kind of package would you be supporting down there? And then a second question is, how do you see the United States economy recovering from the disruption that has been COVID?
Right. So I would lean towards more towards McConnell than Trump and Pelosi. I was disappointed in Trump's budget. Last year, there was $1 trillion out of whack, despite, the surge in the markets and everything else. And I would push for a balanced budget amendment. Let's get that before the courts again. I would anything to stop the spending. But with regards to Chris, the second part, I'm sorry.
The second part is the course of recovery
Oh yeah,
for our
okay.
economy after
Yeah.
COVID.
Right. So we got to open, Chris. We got to get back open, and I've been saying that for a long time. And I look at my kid, my youngest, who plays football. And Illinois is the only state that doesn't play football until you get all the way up to the top of the East Coast. I mean, every other state around here does. And these children, they're not in the classroom. We have a lot of friends who are inner city teachers, and they'll tell you, with the No Child Left Behind, these kids don't even go on their computers. Some of them don't have it, and they're forced to promote them to the next grade. I mean, it's what we're doing to the next generation is absolutely horrible. But as far as like a business plan, I don't know if there's any plaintiff lawyers out there, but I might offend them a little bit. I'm somebody that's run on 3 prongs, that we need less regulation, and that includes at the federal level. I've represented people before administrative agencies, what President Trump refers to, the swamp culture, these people that are around there forever. You piss them off, and then somehow, the EPA showing up at your business on a regular basis and what have you. Too much regulation, too much litigation, and too much taxation. So especially for small businesses, small businesses are the engine that need to grow the economy. We need to let them go to work. We need to stop making things so hard for them. Governor Pritzker, I was up at the rally on Saturday. Everybody's telling me, and we know it for a fact, Governor Pritzker is up there all the time. So he's got this silly rule that if you leave the state, you go drive over the border to get cheaper gas in Wisconsin, that somehow you're supposed to quarantine. I mean, it's just, what's good for us is not good for them.
I want to get back to that, but first, since we're talking about COVID, let me ask about your program for stopping COVID. Now, if you were to take office, it would be in the first week of January next year. What would you look for? What would you insist that the federal government do to stop COVID, which we might at that point be in a new second and very deadly wave? Right.
So look at President Trump. He bounced out like that. What happened? He was talking about that, in terms of the treatment that he received. And, I think that we got to be careful with the food and drug, the administrative agencies that protect things from getting to market. And ultimately, I think that we as a government, we should provide whatever is available to all citizens and make every effort possible to make sure that they get it, and that everyone gets, whether it's a vaccine or whether it's some other form of treatment, that it gets to market quickly and that we get it out there.
There's been a lot of criticism of President Trump's leadership with respect to the response to the COVID inundation and crisis. What grade do you give the administration and the federal government for dealing with this crisis?
Right. So, I mean, I think President Trump's has been a really solid president. But one of the reasons the Tribune endorsed me and not Senator Durbin the first time he hasn't been endorsed is they see that I'm independent of President Trump. I'm not. I think that there was a question about that, and I gave him a B-. I think he's done a really good job, but for sometimes, his rhetoric. But I mean, the bottom line is that he's a 73, 74-year-old successful guy that won an election that nobody said he could win. He has overcome all these odds in life, and he's not going to take our advice. So get over it. I think that he's done a pretty good job. We wish he'd speak differently, but he's not gonna.
And so what then do the rest of us do? I mean, all of us are in on this. He is, at least for the next 8-9 weeks or something, president for all of us. Where do the rest of us go if those many people are on TV saying they don't like the way he speaks, they don't like the trim of his jib. So then what are they
Yeah.
supposed to do?
So, Chris, I just wish more people could see it. That, they painted this scenario the other day, and I don't think it's unrealistic. The Democrats win. It looks like, right now they've got the House wrapped up. It looks like they could easily win the Senate. Let's say Trump loses. Filibuster's gone. They automatically pass whatever they want. AOC is meeting with Biden on a regular basis. We got a $30 trillion New Deal coming through. We got the courts packed so that, moderate judicial philosophy is gone for 50 years. We have we're moving in a direction where China is no longer recognized as a bad guy. In China, I could point you to numerous books that are factual and well written by terrific scholars that show China is hell-bent on destroying America. We move in a direction where these markets are not going to be inspired once they see what the agenda of the left is. So I mean, we got to bring it back home. I mean, we have President Trump. A lot of it we don't like. Some of us would, if we were at the dinner table, we may get up and walk away. But when you're given the choices between Joe Biden and the people that he's surrounding himself with governing versus President Trump, I really can't think that an intellectually honest person wants to go with the Biden group.
Mark, you are running in opposition, obviously, to the Democratic program. The Democrats.
But Chris, I was a Democrat at one time, so I am not a hugely partisan person, though. That's at the end of the day.
Understood.
And for a fact that I've called out the Durkins and the people that are on our party that have run the party for too long and have been there for way too long and are self-serving.
I have personal experience, but let me ask you about a topic which is not just for Democrats, it's for everybody, and that's the pre-existing conditions and really the follow-on to Obamacare. Let's just pick up on some of that conversation at the Amy Coney Barrett hearing last week. Setting aside the Supreme Court, folks are concerned about healthcare. They're concerned about retirement. They're concerned about paying for education and their kids having opportunity. So let's just take these in order. Healthcare. There was a Trump healthcare program. John McCain voted no. It went down. And there hasn't been an entirely integrated Republican healthcare program since. So my question is, with your awareness of the issues like pre-existing conditions and the portability, kids being able to stay on their parents' policies, et cetera, what do you look for in the next chapter of healthcare here in the United States?
Right. So I think there's no question that the left, their agenda is single payer. Obamacare was, they settled on Obamacare, but their end goal is, one healthcare system, do away with private entirely. And if you don't believe that, give me another hour and I'll absolutely convince you. But so what I believe is that essentially, I think that everybody should have healthcare. I mean, I differ from, or at least the opportunity to get it. And I differ probably from a lot of Republicans on that philosophy. There's about 9% that's at or near the poverty level. We could expand Medicaid and take care of those people. As far as pre-existing conditions, I mean, you hear that they were, protected because people could walk in, but I agree with you that was the real problem with doing away with the ACA, is that what happens to people with pre-existing conditions? Because that's the one thing that the ACA sewed up and absolutely spelled out. And so I'm a total pre-existing condition guy. I have a middle son that has osteochondritis. He's had 3 knee surgeries. He would have had more, but for the fact that this um, coronavirus, he wasn't able to get surgery this past year. So it's all from a genetic conditions. He's had stomach issues that have had us at both Northwestern and ULCC, which has the best gastro doctors there are. So we cannot not protect pre-existing conditions, but we have to protect private healthcare as well, because people, like the people that's sitting in that room, they've worked really hard to have that Cadillac healthcare, and there's nothing wrong with them wanting what's best for their families.
All right. So moving on then to funding retirement. People are frequently being accused. Trump is sometimes accused. Democrats are sometimes of gutting Social Security, et cetera. And I wonder if you could offer your view on retirement security for older Americans and for folks who are, say, in their 30s and 40s and beginning to look at their paycheck stubs and wondering how are they going to save for their retirement.
Right. So, I mean, I've said this, that I'll protect Social Security and Medicare, certainly for the people that are currently receiving or intent on receiving in the next, few decades. They've been paying into it, and it has to be protected. And the reality is that, it's it's only got about 10, 12 years of solvency left. So how can I say that? Well, there's cuts in the federal budget that could be made. At the end of the day, I've talked about, as sheriff, I gave money back to the county every year. No federal agency works that way. They all spend out their budgets, and that's the way they're wired, so that they get the same amount of money the next year. There is fat in the federal budget, and that needs to be addressed. At the end of the day, and I mean, this may not sound right, but I have no intention of going there right now. Maybe we need to raise corporate tax, a little bit, or something to increase revenues. We got to be very careful with any type of an increase, but we've got to protect Social Security and Medicare for those that there's already enough reasons to think that a revolution is around the corner. To take those away would be not good.
Education. Out of the blue, a couple of years ago, people started talking about making all community college degrees free. And then we saw Senator Sanders in his campaign take that a few extra steps, as did AOC and her group, the Squad. Where are you on funding higher education, both at the community college level and at the college and university level?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just not in favor of the government giving away more things until you can show me how that's going to be. Where's that money going to come from? I mean, we already have $27 trillion in debt, and that's Dick Durbin kicked that can down the road, voting for every debt ceiling increase, voting for every tax increase, thousands of tax increases, and everything's a runaway train. So we got to figure out how are we going to pay for it before we're going to do anything like that. So my oldest son, he wanted to go to Indiana, and that was like going to be like 45 grand. I said, I'm not going to pay for that. So we wound up going to Iowa State, which was 21, I think, because he got a little bit of a scholarship all in. And he looked at Champaign for a second. I think that was like 36 at the time, all in. And so why is it that, he goes to a beautiful campus in Iowa? If you haven't been to Ames, it is just gorgeous. But, Illinois is ruining everything. I mean, and it's, the Democrats and the pensions that we have university professors that are drawing $200,000 and $300,000 pensions, and they're only in their 50s. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And so the cost of the university system in Illinois is horrible. Illinois is really a poorly run state. If you, one more reason why you want me out there, I fear nobody. I really don't. I'll speak truth on all these issues. So what we need to do is people in other states are able to go to college. And you know what? Community college is really cheap to begin with.
Okay. People want to be secure in their homes, secure in their possessions. They want to be able to walk down the street, drive around their hometown. Here are some numbers from Hey Jackass. about Chicago in 2020. So far, shot and killed in Chicago this year, 587. Shot and wounded in Chicago this year, 2,857. So our total number of individuals who have been shot is 3,444. The total number of homicides in Chicago in 2020 right now at 647 in 2020. CPD has reported that since 2000, we have seen more than 16,000 carjackings, which I understand, maybe anecdotally, are tending to be more violent and more dangerous for the victims. You have spent a career in law enforcement at the
Right.
local level and at the state level. You mentioned you're having studied at the FBI Academy, so you've had exposure at that level. How do you, as a law enforcement professional who's worn the badge, understand these numbers? And how do you interpret these numbers for regular people in Illinois, regular people in Chicago, who want to live their lives without being in fear?
Yeah. So, I don't know, I mentioned to you before that my dad was a member of the Midday Club. So, I kind of know the circle a little bit of the listeners out there. But a lot of these small business guys that are immigrants and what have you, first generation, they're done. I mean, they're just not going to reopen. And crime is one of the big reasons. And so you have a mayor of Chicago that she lives with her wife in Sauganash now, I believe she's moved to, which a lot of people from my high school lived in Sauganash. Really nice neighborhood. She's got a dozen or so uniformed cops out there all the time in front of her house. And then they're not even touching the south side where all these shootings are happening. Almost all the shootings are south of State and Madison, but they're obviously the crime went into the loop, as we see, and it's going to continue to come into the loop in the north side. And what's happening all throughout America is you have these big city mayors that appoint the police chief and the superintendent with the approval of a city council. And then that police chief is under the impression that he works for the mayor. And so the mayor says, I want, a dozen squads and I want a dozen officers in front of my house. And I want you guys standing down with these people out on the streets. And then the cities go up in flames. Well, the chief and the officers, they've taken an oath to handle that situation differently. And they, as you said, I went to the FBI Academy. I also went to the police academy, something I didn't have to do. I did every job in the office. I went to Northwestern Staff Command. I had so much training. I'm a sponge for training. So we know how to handle those situations. We're trained to handle those situations so that they don't result and they don't get out of hand. We know exactly what to do. But we're told to disregard our training because the mayor, for political reasons, wants us to disregard our training. Well, I've written about this. I had a piece that was in National Review, another piece that was in Real Clear Politics, talking about essentially that, not Real Clear, something else recently, talking about the fact that we need to get the police department away from the mayors and the city councils, and they need to be they get chosen and then they get contracts and those contracts are reviewed and everything else, and they report to an independent body. But the other thing is to elect mayors that aren't, obsessed with pandering to the left.
So I want to, Sheriff Mark, I want to
Yes.
go another layer here.
Yes.
Okay. I think there are two big strains of thought about the origins of this violence.
Yeah.
Maybe one of them is that the shattered communities without male role models have created circumstances that increase the
Yeah.
gang recruitment and involvement in gang activity, principally drugs, but also gambling, prostitution, whatever. The other sort of theme that one hears is that a failure on society's part to fund programs to ameliorate these issues in the community has exacerbated the impacts of broken families, etc. Okay.
Right.
So one way or another, sad to say, very sad to say, some young men are trending into gangs. And of that group, some are getting into violence. And of that group, some are killing people out there to the number, 650 this year so far.
Right.
Okay.
That number, Chris, 1990, when we hit 1,000, we didn't have that number of shootings. So healthcare is way better. And we don't drive people in ambulances, across the city anymore. We get them treatment at the scene. So we're saving lives, but the shootings are going up.
My question is,
those people are Northwestern rehab for the rest of their lives, oftentimes.
what is it that has apparently caused the increase in the street level shootings?
Yeah, so it's always been about essentially the street gangs, and it's been about narcotic territory and protecting the territory, and that's always what's driven all of this. And I submit to you that a lot of it gets back to the fact that the police department is beaten down. They're not allowed to do their job, that they're brought up on disciplinary charges. Some bad guy in Minnesota does a bad thing of which he should go to prison, and somehow all police officers are like that. Or Laquan McDonald. Who wants to defend Jason Van Dyke? I mean, his lawyer is actually a friend. His lawyer was a friend of mine, but I wouldn't want that case, because there's no reason to have him shot. But that's not the way Chicago Police Department typically acts. And now you've got them where, in the union mindset and in the union world that we live in, you don't get out of your squad. There's nothing I can really do with you, duty as a CEO. You know what I mean? It's really hard to discipline somebody for taking an extra 10 minutes to get out of their squad, or stopping at all the lights instead of throwing on it's just. But if you do something wrong, yeah, then I can discipline you.
So if you are, go ahead.
Yeah, so what you said as far as the societal, I mean, obviously, getting back to my natural law worldview, men and women equal in dignity, different in gifts. Ideally, we want a father and a mother in the home. Do we spend enough money on education in Black neighborhoods? Probably not, or at least the money that we spend is mismanaged. I mean, we could be doing more there. There is, if you want systematic racism, that's probably with the money we spend in schools. It's not in the way that police generally handle things. The reality is that when President Obama was in the state Senate, we passed that racial profiling bill for law enforcement. So police have to, write all that data down. And I've said that if any group is suspect to rogue officers and their rights being violated, it's much more likely to be Latinos, because maybe they don't speak the language, they don't assert their rights properly, what have you. So
we've covered a lot. We've talked a little bit about international affairs. We've talked about the economy, about education and retirement, taxes, et cetera. I do want to ask you one more sort of policy area question.
Turn this on. Sorry.
That's okay.
I don't know if
I want to ask you one more. We can see you brilliantly.
Yeah.
I want to ask you one more policy question before kind of get to a summation here.
Yeah.
And that's about military strength. And
yes.
We Union League Club it serves as the local committee for the christening of the new Hyman G. Rickover SSN 795 submarine.
Yeah.
And we do so with a lot of great organizations, including the Standard Club, many Navy League chapters, et cetera, et cetera. But we are sort of leading that charge for that particular event, the christening and the commissioning of the Hyman Rickover. So in so doing, last week, we welcomed retired 3-star Admiral Jay Donnelly, who took us through a global perspective for submarine forces and our Navy in the 21st century. And the result of that, you talk about China, the result of that is we are in need of more ships, more hulls, more boats in the case of submarines. Obviously, we've got demands at the Marine Corps, the Air Force, the Army, the Coast Guard, and now the Space Force. What's your view of our proper force structuring, and what kind of military would you seek if you were to become a U.S. Senator?
Generally, I subscribe to the concept of peace through strength. So, I wouldn't be looking to make big military cuts. I mean, I would want an analysis as to every region of the world that we're in, and to really break down, is that necessary that we're there? What's the interest of America? Ultimately, I think we need to put our own interests first. I mentioned Israel as a partner that we need to protect, but beyond that, we don't want China growing in influence. We got to keep an eye on Russia. There's a reason why we are in all these areas, but some of those reasons have disappeared, if you will. And so we got to get back to let's make sure that we really need that force there. As far as technology and updating, I would be in favor of all that. I mean, I think law enforcement as well. We pay the price when we don't spend the money on things that we need.
Mark Curran, you're running for Senate. You're running against a lion of the Senate, Dick Durbin. And I say that because he's been there so long, regardless of what anyone's opinion of him might be. It's a Democratic state these days, tough for a Republican to get elected, but you have made an impression. And so, say, the Tribune is endorsing you. And so you've achieved some level of credibility in your campaign. I want you to take the next few minutes to talk about where you would be in 6 years if somehow you are elected, if you're the selection of the voters of the state of Illinois, and you go to Washington to serve as a senator for the next 6 years. 6 years' time, assuming that you allow yourself to run for re-election, what kind of record would you want to be able to present to Illinois voters in seeking re-election?
There's a question that popped up.
Yeah.
So, Chris, what I would say to the people out there is that there's a great chance that Mark Curran will win. So we're going to have great numbers coming out of Southern and Central Illinois. It's overwhelmingly Republican, very, very fired up. The fact that Mark Curran is from up north bodes well. President Trump lost Lake County by 21 points. And I'm going to do well here. I'm going to do well in McHenry. I'm going to do well in DuPage. I'm going to do well in Cook. So Pat O'Brien's polling at around 40+% now, 43% even, it looks like, 25% for Mark Curran, and he wins. What kind of legacy would I want, Chris? I think that people are tired of the fact that they see that all these special interests and their voice has gotten lost. And I want to be the guy that reinstores confidence in the American system and in politicians, that somebody's not simply, talking the Republican points or the Democrat points, somebody that is truly committed to truth, truly committed to Illinois, truly committed to doing what's right, that there's no ulterior motives. Put it all out on the table. Like I said, Senator Durbin, the Tribune did a story a number of years ago where his wife was representing 10 entities as a lobbyist, and that he voted on those pieces of legislation that affected them, even though she was a state lobbyist. The business intertwined. So we need to know these things, and he does that kind of stuff all the time. All the soft money you look at. I don't have that. I don't have any money from PACs. I don't have any money from if you were to go and you see, it's just a zillion small donors that have given to Mark Curran, just people that want good government. So I owe something to them, Chris. I haven't made any money in government. It's truly about service. And I think that one of the things that President Trump has done well is he's exposed that there is corruption and that there is a swamp. And I mentioned, Mitch McConnell. I want him to win his reelection, but the thing that I'm saying is I'd never vote for that guy to be the president again. I mean, it's time to hand the car keys over to somebody else. It's just not healthy for our government, for America, to have these people that stay there forever and ever and ever. And then, we're at their whims. That's not what our founders envisioned. So I think that Mark Curran is somebody that, and people that have followed me forever will say to you, the guy's not a liar. You know what I mean? Sometimes we don't like what he says, and maybe he has a little bit like President Trump says things that maybe he shouldn't have said or what have you, but it's part of being authentic and part of being real and not being calculated. I'm just not that way. So I think that I'll be a great contrast to what you have right now. Somebody that, he's an aw shucks guy and shuffles his feet and has good manners and presents well, but he's a far left partisan and he'll put a knife in your back. Just ask all the people that he's used the government to go after over the years. So it's a great contrast. And I won Democrats over in Lake County, and I think that I'd win Democrats over all throughout Illinois if given the chance.
Sheriff Mark.
Well, it's electcurran.com if they can help me, Chris. Electcurran.com. Any contribution helps. Anything you can do, spread the word. I have a terrific chance to win, and it will be the upset that will send shockwaves through the system. And Chris probably knows this. There's a lot of Republicans that don't want me to win either, because I'm really truly an independent guy that will not be controlled.
Sheriff Mark Curran, it's a privilege for the Union League Club to welcome you today. And we appreciate you taking time out to meet with our members. And we ask you also to thank the Standard Club for co-sponsoring this. We certainly appreciate their support. Win or lose, we hope to see you around the clubhouse, both for your wisdom and for your relaxation needs. Okay.
Right.
We want you to come by. All right.
Love to.
So with that, I'm gonna close this session and thank you and thank all of the folks who have joined us. This will be on our YouTube channel shortly. I'm not sure if it's today or tomorrow. Will be soon. And we appreciate everybody coming and look to us on, let's see, Wednesday. I think we're hosting Pat O'Brien, who you mentioned, and Thursday we'll be hosting Kim Fox for more conversations in fulfillment of our commitment to community and country. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Take care. Thank you.